There you go. We have live people here and we have live people there. We don't see the reflection of the live people. Anyway, sorry for the late start, but we are going to get to the subject at hand. So the title, can we turn off the light, please? Sama. This is the real one that needs to go off. The other ones can stay on. This one doesn't go off. Okay. So everybody's going to regret they're not on Zoom where they can see the PowerPoint normally. But anyway, okay, fine. You're serious? You can't turn off this light? Sama, you serious? This doesn't go off? No. Okay, so the title of, I don't have the exact title, but it was something about looking about things under the microscope. And that's part of the purpose of today's class is teach the halachas of teloyim, of checking food to make sure you don't end up eating insects. And one of the principles is that we're going to be speaking about that it doesn't have anything to do with a microscope. Okay, but I'm going to go with with somewhat of a seder, and you can perhaps see over here that things are different from the past. So people often wonder, why is it that there's more talk, or it seems to be more talk or more problems when it comes to checking food for insects? What happened in the past? Like people, all of these things people used to eat, and suddenly it's a problem. Like how in the world did this happen? So probably the greatest authority on what's happening in this field in the world is a rabbi in Eretz Yisrael named Rabbi. He came up with a 3-book set in Hebrew where he has pictures of every possible fruit and vegetable and what different problems there could be. I have, with his permission, some pictures over here. In English, it's available in 1 volume, just by the way, where it goes down without the lengthy halachic discussion where he has this. And he has, I'm not going to go through all 11, he has 11 reasons why it's different today than it was in the past. And for anyone that's been on a farm in Eretz Yisrael, anybody been on a farm in Eretz Yisrael recently? Like in the late, I don't know how many years ago, but just to give you an example, that they have sensors now in the earth to sense when the soil needs to be watered. Okay, it doesn't go on a cycle of time. It goes on a cycle of exactly when it needs to be watered. Growing techniques have changed so vastly. The same piece of land that years ago would produce, let's say 1,000 kilo, today could produce 5,000 kilo, 10,000 kilo, depending on what they're doing. Years ago, some people maybe here remember when the people were saying there's never going to be enough food to feed the world's population, and you shouldn't have children, God forbid, because people are going to starve as a result of the lack of resources in the world to be able to grow food. Where today, each piece of land has the fertility of the land has far outgrown the growth of the world's population. They're people that are starving is because of the political situation, that they won't allow the food to get to the people. But people are burning food.
Pause the
You don't want to. What? You just stop the share.
It's here. Which one is it?
Where are you trying to this one? Yeah. That's the problem.
No, it's not.
They couldn't see before. Okay, nice. In any case, the revolution that we've seen in technology and in medicine is actually in farming too. Now the problem is that there's so much food, the price is down. You can't get people to stay on the farms because they can't earn a living because they're not making enough money because the prices come down so much. So as a result of this, the plants are optimized for growth. That's what they're doing. But guess what? As the plants are optimized for growth, guess what else is optimized for growth? Those little parts of the animal kingdom that feed off the fruits and vegetables. That's just one simple example. I'm not going to go through all 11 examples over here. So here's just an example. Again, I don't know, the people that are here can't really read it. But as a result of people traveling back and forth, it's also caused a total chaos. You know, when you cross the border, you can't bring in fruits and vegetables. You ever wonder, like, what's the problem? I mean, you're going to bring in a piece of lettuce in your sandwich. Like it's a security threat to the United States or to Canada. I mean, why in the world are they doing that? Well, the reason is this. The reason is insects. That's why they're checking it. Because if there's an insect that does not have a natural predator that eats it up and it comes to a new country, so then it will just spread uncontrolled. So here is just one example. You can see the black lines, but if you can't see the map, this is Spain and Portugal here. And then this is France, and this is Russia, you know, here's Vladivostok, and there's Japan on the other end. And you see over here, the first time, they have records of every single insect, and they check to see where it's shown up. So the Colorado beetle came from Colorado, yeah? So how did it end up in Europe? The first time it was spotted in Europe, I can barely read this myself, is I think 1921. See the arrow over here? That it landed over here in France. It was the first time they ever saw a Colorado beetle outside of North America. But from there, it spread. I guess they fly slowly, or the people travel slowly. Somebody took it, I guess, on a train, and it got to Vladivostok in 1979. Okay, so it took quite a number of years, but you see how it spread everywhere. So leaf miner, I'll show you. I think I have a picture of a leaf. I might even have a video of a leaf miner if we get there. I don't think we'll get there. This goes to 11? What time? So a leaf miner was totally unknown in Eretz Yisrael. Israel did not see leaf miners until a number of years ago, and now the whole Israel is full of leaf miners. And that's a result of people traveling more than they ever did in the past. So that's one thing that changed. A major difference is pesticide use. So you see over here, you can't see those in the room. It's these lights. Should have shown that somewhere else. In any case, they're spraying DDT. You can't see all this white over here is sprayed. People everybody should have Zoom, you know, I can see the PowerPoint. And they just sprayed it and they just killed everything. DDT, and there were other pesticides, but primarily DDT was a pesticide that was so effective in the 60s of wiping out insects that it was so effective. There were really, according to halacha, you did not need to check lettuce for insects when they were using DDT because it was killing all the insects. The only problem is it was killing a lot of people too. So DDT was taken off the market when they found out that it was dangerous to human life. But what happened in all the years that they used DDT, the insects developed a resistance to the insecticides, just like when you have antibiotics and you take too much antibiotic, keep taking antibiotics, and then when you really need an antibiotic, it doesn't work because the only bacteria that the antibiotic didn't kill would gibatim, the strongest of the bacteria that a regular antibiotic can't take care of. So now what happened is with the pesticides, the only ones that were left were like superbugs. Okay, and they were very, very difficult to get rid of. So what happened was once they took these strong pesticides off the market, so then even things that, not only the things that had problems returned, the things that didn't have problems developed. Okay, that's exactly what happened with strawberries. Everybody asks, what's with strawberries? What's the whole tumult about strawberries? Okay, I'll explain to you what happened with strawberries. It's all Montreal's fault. A little bit of an exaggeration, but just an interesting thing. Everybody has heard of the Kyoto Protocol. They have been talking about saving the environment and various steps in order to take care of the environment. So there are different international meetings that happen in different cities. Kyoto in Japan was probably the most famous one of the most famous ones. But they had a meeting in Montreal also. So there's something called the Montreal Protocol. Nothing to do with Montreal. It's just a meeting happened to be in Montreal. And at that meeting, they prohibited a pesticide, sodium bromide, I think it's called, which was a certain pesticide that they claimed harmed the ozone layer. So they said, you're no longer allowed to use sodium bromide. But guess what? That's the only pesticide that really works on strawberries. So when you come to a strawberry crop and you spray the whole thing of sodium bromide, so it used to be, there were a couple of bugs on the strawberries, but not like out of hand. But the farmers didn't do it for the Jews. The farmers did it because the insects eat up the crop and it costs them money. So they spray the whole thing with the sodium bromide, and then there's no bugs. Beautiful strawberries, everything's growing. But then guess what? It came the Montreal Protocol, can't use sodium bromide anymore. So they tried to use substitutes and nothing worked. So they kept applying for exemptions. So they didn't enforce it right away, but they kept going year after year after year. So we'll give you another year, we'll give you another year, we'll give you another year, until finally the international bodies in charge of this said no more. Okay, no more sodium bromide. Okay, that's exactly when the bug problem started with the strawberries. Okay, when they started enforcing the Montreal Protocol. And the reason it became such a problem, because the insects that before were not a problem didn't have to compete with the regular insects, you know, these big schlub insects, you know, that were very easy to find. And now they were all killed off by the pesticides, but now you don't use pesticides anymore. The only one that survived the sodium bromide era are these little, very, very difficult to find insects. So now we have a strawberry problem. We don't have a strawberry problem, we have an insect problem with the strawberries. I once suspected that in China, they don't pay any attention to these protocols. So I thought maybe the IQF, that's the like frozen fruit that's coming from China, maybe that was clean. So I spoke to Mashkiach that does Ashkach in China. Someone from Eide Chredis for the good Mashkiach. So he said, oh, yeah, I thought the same thing. He says, but China, it's so out of control. So you have places that Taka, the strawberries are very clean because they use all the old pesticides. He says, on the other hand, you have those that don't even barely clean the strawberries at all. So they don't use any pesticides, not because of any protocol, it's just because, you know, it's China and everybody does whatever they want and they all get mixed together. So it's he said it's also not reliable. And just, you know, whether it's good or bad, if you look at a list of the foods, I mean, this is not our subject today, but we're talking about pesticides. When you want to talk about the types of foods that traditionally have had the most residue of pesticides, strawberries was always highest on that list. They're probably still on the list, but it doesn't apply anymore because they prohibited those pesticides. Okay, so that's another reason why it is that it's so much more of a problem today than it was in the past. Okay, so now we need to get clear some halachas. Okay, so we're going to talk about first, what exactly is the halacha? Do you need, according to halacha, to check your food for insects before you eat it? And the answer to that question, as it is in most areas of halacha, is, I've had students in seminary, you know, what's the answer to halacha questions? It depends. Everything depends. Depends on conditions. Depends. Sometimes you do need to check. Sometimes you don't need to check. So we have actually three categories over here. So I guess you can, people that have it on their screen, they can make it as big as they want, and the people here, oh, people are going to give out, you know, today's world, you know. You come live to the thing, and in order to get the proper learning, you have to go on Zoom. Should I go on Zoom also? Okay. I'm going to leave now and go on Zoom so I can sit there with my little. Okay, fine. There's something else also. You just take this screen and move it over there. Everybody moves back, and you take the screen and you put it past those lights. Because you have to move the projector too. I don't know if you can do that. I mean, you move the screen and you have to move the projector too. It's just an idea. Or everybody can stay put and look at their phones. Okay. So it depends how much infested the food is. Okay, has anybody ever found a worm in a green pepper? Raise your hand if you ever found a worm in a green pepper. Okay, happens often? Doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen often. A red pepper, yellow pepper, it can happen. You ever found a worm in an apple? Yeah, it happens often. No, maybe the apple tree in your backyard, you'll find them more often because they're not being sprayed. But commercial apples, you very rarely, it's certainly under 1%. That's for sure. So that's one category of things. Then you have a category of things which the majority have insects. Broccoli is probably in that category. That the majority of broccoli, the majority exactly of what is a debate, so I'll just leave it in general, the word majority, that the majority, at least according to the Broccoli Growers Association of the United States, the majority of broccoli has bugs. What do I mean the majority has bugs? That each piece of broccoli will have at least one insect. They say more like 3 or 4, and they have no way of getting rid of it. That's majority. Then you have a large intermediate category of foods that they have bugs, but it's not a majority, it's a minority. So we have records. For example, you have Bodek, the Bodek factory here in Montreal. Bodek makes all over the world, but the romaine lettuce they make here in Montreal, and there's a mashgiach, and he checks samples from every load that comes in. And we have records of how much cabbage was checked and how much lettuce was checked and how many insects. And it's always, even iceberg lettuce, which has less insects than romaine lettuce, for example, and the white cabbage always has what's called in halacha a miyut hamotzu. So I need to define that term. It's a very important term. I have it here on the PowerPoint in English. So you see, we have on the right-hand side is the axis of degree of infestation, and on top is the halacha, chiyuv bedika. Do you need to check it or not? So we have 3 different boxes there. So the top is if it's majority. So do you need to check it? Yes, you need to check it mid'oraisa. It's a biblical obligation. In other words, minatera, you're not allowed to eat the broccoli until you check it. Now the question, can you check it? That's another question. But you're not allowed to, and if you can't check it, then you can't eat it. And that's mid'oraisa. If this particular type of food is majority infested, then it's halacha, you're not allowed to eat it minatera. Mid'oraisa, you're not allowed to eat it. Now, let's say it's less than a majority. Okay, let's say the lettuce, which in our days is a miyut hamotzi. We have 2 types of miyut. Miyut means a minority. You have a minority that's common and a minority that's not common. I understand that's not a halachic term. In the Hebrew, we say matzui, in the halacha, shchiach, matzui, different ways it's referred to, but it doesn't really matter because it doesn't have like a real clear percentage-wise definition. Is something uncommon or something common. So pretty much, fortunately for us, most things fit clearly into one or the other categories. Our apples are clearly a miyut she'eina matzeh. It's not common. A worm in a green pepper is not common. That's clear. A miyut hamatzui, leafy vegetables in general are miyut hamatzui, which means that they're commonly found, but they're a minority. So if it's a miyut hamatzui, if it's a minority, but it's commonly found, then you have to check it before you eat it, but it's a rabbinical obligation. It's midrabanan, you have to check it. So this is midraisa, you have to check it. This midrabanan, you have to check it. And those are the 2 orange boxes over here, whether it's a biblical obligation or a rabbinic obligation. Now, let's say it's a miyut she'eina matzeh. Do you have to check it? So al pi halacha, you don't have to check it. If you want to check it, you can check it. There's nothing wrong with checking it. And it's really quite an amazing din. Let me just explain. Let's say 1% of apples would have worms, for example, or 1%. Let's leave it. Doesn't matter example. Okay, 1% of apples would have worms. It's much less, but let's say, for argument's sake, it would be 1% of apples. That's clearly a miyut she'eina matzeh. Some of the poskim, I'll debate soon precise application of this halakha in a moment. Let's just get the general idea. Let's say 1% of apples have worms in it. So, it's a miyuchein matzui. It's not a common occurrence, and therefore you don't, according to halakha, you don't need to check it. Okay. Now, let's say there's 100 apples, and you're really hungry. Okay. Let's say it's it's a little ridiculous case, but for the halakha, it's good enough. Okay. Are you allowed to eat all 100 apples? If you knew that there was one in there, I mean, nobody can eat 100 apples anyway, right? Okay, if there's 100 people, can you give each one an apple? You allowed? Is somebody going to end up eating a worm? I'm not saying, okay, you'll find it, like the old joke, what's worse than finding a worm, right? Finding half a worm. But the person's probably not going to eat it because they're going to see it. But let's say they weren't able to see it. You're allowed to give each one of these 100 people an apple according to halacha? No problem, because everybody is allowed to say, halachically speaking, I'm eating from the 99. I have to worry that I got the one. It's like, people play the lottery. You get a raffle ticket. Some people always win. Over here, somebody loses. Okay, but according to halacha, you are not obligated to check that to make sure that you're not one of the one out of the 100. You can assume, according to halacha, you're one of the 99. Now, a person might say to themselves, and some of you might be saying now, I'm not giving 100 of my guests an apple, and I know I'm feeding somebody a worm. I'm not going to do that. Okay, if you want to be like that, so all the power to you. But that's called lifnim mishuras hadin. The halacha does not require you to do that. Okay, and if you think it through, life would become like impossible. Really. So the Torah has a certain stringency, and the fact is, eating insects is more strict than most other isurim, most other prohibitions of the Torah. You have a Gemara Makis, which goes through the whole exercise. What's the one thing a person could do and get the maximum number of violations that you get lashes for in the days of the Sanhedrin? And the winner is a bug. You could eat one bug and get 6 different prohibitions. Okay, eating pork is one prohibition. So it's very, very severe. The Pri Chodesh says, why did Hashem make so many prohibitions? Because Hashem knew that it's hard to check. It's hard to check, so people need zeros, people need encouragement. It's a hard job. It's going to take time. So in order to impress people that they really need to do it, so you put many isurim. In any case, why am I stressing this? There are a couple of reasons I'm stressing this. First of all, I came here to teach you halachas. It isn't halach. But there's something else also. In the discussion that you hear, there's always been misinformation out there. Now with social media, it became even worse. But it's difficult for people to differentiate between something which is just an extra stringency and something which is halachically required. So when somebody says, hey, I found a worm in my green pepper, and they take a video and everybody says, oh, disgusting. And they go all grossed out, and then they go and they check their peppers. They check 100 peppers, 200 peppers, 500 peppers. And they don't find a single worm. Then somebody sends out a picture of a bug in the broccoli and say, oh, it's ridiculous. Why do people make a whole tumult about bugs? Okay, so it's very important to differentiate. If somebody wants to check their peppers because they're afraid they always win the lottery or lose the lottery, or they think they're going to be the one out of 1,000. Okay, if you want to do that, that's fine. Okay, but don't use that. And I see it happen with many people that they end up treating the whole subject not seriously because they think the whole thing's a big exaggeration. So I half agree with that. Yes, there's a lot of exaggeration out there. The things that need to be stressed are under stressed, and the things that need to be put in the background are overstressed. Hope that made sense. I think I said that right. Okay. Any questions?
How do you know?
Okay, so we're learning. That's why you came now.
How do you know apples in one?
So that's the job of the kashrus organizations, and there are lists about what things you need to check and what things you don't need to check. There's no way you can. They're different. I'm going to give some resources if I get there by the end. Okay. So it said on the title of this lecture about using a microscope. The first question is, are the insects visible? Okay, so the fact is that in the air, there are a bunch of live things that you're inhaling as you breathe. Okay, if you ever looked at a drop of water under a microscope, you'll see it's lebendig and freilich. There's a bunch of stuff swimming around over there, and they don't have fins and scales, so they're not fish, and they don't have split hooves. And if they did, you'd have to slaughter them kosher and they were shchita. So these are not.
It's not on the screen. The thing visible, they cannot see it.
Okay, so it's not visible. So they got the point, it's not visible. Okay. So that's the first question. If something cannot be seen without a microscope, data was not given to malachim, wasn't given to the angels, it was given to human beings. And we have certain things that we can see and certain things that are too small for us to see. A live creature that is only can be seen microscopically is permitted according to the halacha. That there's no argument about it. Everybody agrees about that. Now, most of the insects that we're talking about are very clearly visible, and there's no question about that. Aphids and thrips are clearly visible to the naked eye. We're talking about a person that has normal vision and at a normal distance and without a magnifying glass, you're able to see them. You're able to see them. They might be small. When you have, I'll give some examples over here. So most of these insects are clearly visible. There is one intermediate category, which could be confusing. What I mean confusing, it happens to be a machlekas apaskin. If you see a dot, this is on purpose. If you see a dot, so you see it, but you can't see that it's an insect. You don't know, maybe it's a black piece of dirt, and maybe it's got legs, but the legs are too small for you to see. What is the status? Is that called visible? Does visible mean that visible, not microscopic, that you can see that it exists? Or does visible mean you can see that it's an insect? That is a machlekas aposkim. Most of the kashrus organizations, since we're dealing with the biblical prohibition, are more strict, but there are many poskim that are lenient. So if you want to know what to do, you have to ask your Rav, your Pesach, how it is he decides on this. Now, the vast majority of cases are not like that. And so to get back to the strawberry story for a second, in strawberries, there are different types of insects you can find there. So there's one kind that's clearly visible. There's a few kinds that are clearly visible, but there's another that's in this category that you can see it, but you can't see whether it's an insect or not. So that there's a machlekas apaskim, but that's called visible or not. So just give some examples over here. Hang on. No, strawberries, you have. Why is it that this is not proceeding properly? Huh? No, I can't go to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to stop share for a second. Stop share. Hello, everybody. I had to stop share. Oh, my camera's off. Okay, so I can't say hello. So we're going to put on the camera. Hello. Hi. Okay, now it's off. Now we're going to share again because my PowerPoint has been disabled. Let's just go on to the next screen here. Participants now. Okay, so here is sort of the, according to one opinion at least, the breaking point. You see 70 microns. A micron is, I think, a hundredth of a millimeter. Okay, that's the width of a hair. Diameter, excuse me, the diameter of a human hair is 70 microns. Can you see a hair? One hair you can see. Yeah, but a hair you can see because it's long. Let's say the hair was only as long as it was wide. You'd be able to see it? Officially, yes. This is what it's showing. Your screen sharing is paused. Resume share. How about now? What do you see now? Wait a second. And now, 1 second. And what about now? You can see it? No, it's paused. It's not. Okay, so we're gonna have to do it low tech style. Zoom share. We're gonna make this bigger. Okay, well, visible? I guess not. Okay. In any case, Zoom slideshow? No, it's not working. It won't show on both at the same time. Fine. In any case, you see from a siddur, you have a chidik, is the dat. Hashem svosai tiftach ufi yagiti lasecha. That little point under the fey. Okay, you can see it. It's called a chidik. Modern Hebrew called charakim, or insects. Okay, that little dot you can see. Now, if it was an insect and it had legs, you'd be able to tell that it had legs. You probably wouldn't be able to tell. Now, over here, this is really quite compelling, but unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see it. But there are micro letters printed on many currencies. They do it in many countries, Japan and the Philippines and all different countries. They do this, and the United States has it. I don't think Canada does it. But one of the ways they make the money difficult to counterfeit is they put micro letters on the currency. And these micro letters are barely visible. So you see over here by the 20, here's a US 20, here's the US 20. And right over here, it just looks like little lines. But if you look closely, you'll see that there are letters there. Okay? There are letters over here. Inside the 0 of the 20, there are letters. All over the place, these bills, they have these little tiny letters that are barely visible. Here you have on a $5 bill. You see on the side of a $5 bill, you got these little swirls on the side over there. There's letters inside all of them. Okay, and over here, where you have also these pillars here, that there's letters. Fortunately, you can't see them. All over, there are these little letters. Now, I really wanted to show you this video, but I guess I'm going to skip it because it's late and it's also the technology is not enabling me to do so. I called it Monster Mite because I was once translating for somebody who was making a presentation here on insects, somebody from Eretz Yisrael. And actually, it was somebody else, it was somebody from England. I didn't have to translate. I was sort of escorting him around and showing him different places. In any case, they had the screen that was like 2.5 stories high. It was a big auditorium, and it had this bug magnified like that. And you heard the people like gasped. They put up this picture of this bug. It looked like from a monster movie or something like that. It was blown up like that. And it was something that was found also, one of these things, like it's something which is not common. When the people, it reminded me, you have these stories, the days of the Baal Shem Tov, you had these Magidim that would tell people Divrei Musar, and the ladies are fainting in the Weibershul, and they're falling down from the balcony, and the people are listening to all the descriptions of this horrible Gehenna and things like this, and the people people are having these deep cries of charata about all of these things. Now, so I found an exhibition where they had, they put dramatic music to this mite. Okay, so a mite, you have different types of mites. So you have in flour, there's a very big problem, these mites. But again, the Torah was not given to angels. In flour, there's such a thing, they call them in the halachic literature, in Yiddish, they call them milbin. Milbin are very small. The mites that are in flour are very tiny. In fact, the only way you can really see them is that flour doesn't move by itself. right? If you pour it, flour moves. But if you just let it sit there, it doesn't like walk around and make trails in the other pieces of flour because it's from the plant kingdom. Plants don't move, okay? And the bugs do. So when you see something that looks like a little fleck of flour and it's moving across the paper, across the plate, then you know it's milben, it's not a piece of flour. So you have mites like that, which are visible only when they move. In fact, Rashi in Chumash brings down the taich when it speaks in Chumash about insects, that it's because they move that you're able to see them. But there are other mites, so dust mites, for example. So many people, they say they're allergic to dust. They're not really allergic to dust. They're allergic to dust mites. Fact is, they're not really allergic to dust mites either. I don't know how to put this nicely, but the dust mites eat, and then there's something that comes out of the dust mite, okay? That's what people are allergic to, okay? But this whole thing is microscopic. You cannot see a dust mite. There are, I had this video over here that I'm not showing you, where it says that there are hundreds of thousands of dust mites in every mattress and pillow, okay? There are a lot of them, and they're microscopic. And they don't really show up in food that much. It just give you this idea of what's visible, it's not visible. So here's an example of a strawberry, which you can't see on the screen, but a little tiny black dot, okay? Is that black dot, it happens to be an insect, but from looking at it, you would not be able to tell whether it's an insect or not, because to you, it looks like a little dot. Is that a problem or is it not a problem? That's a machlekes poskim. Now you have other ones, you see the little oval-shaped pink spots over here on this strawberry. Those are parts of the strawberry. But you have a little insect that looks very, very similar to those white seeds. And the best indication that it's a bug is that the white seeds don't walk around on the surface of the strawberry, and the bugs do. Okay, but until you've seen it and been shown by somebody, it's very difficult to tell. Now, the regular insects you see, there's aphids, very, very common on lettuce. And that's one of the big problems because you have many of them that are green. So especially on the romaine lettuce, they're dark green and you cannot see them because they blend into the background. And that's why when you look at it with backlighting, which would be basically taking the piece of lettuce and holding up to the light, okay, which in the old days, they have today light boxes, and people always ask the question, how do they do it before they had light boxes? Well, they had the sun. Yeah, the sun's been around for a long time. Some people just go outside and you check it outside. It's better than a light box. More light from the sun than you have on any light box or any light like this. But the idea is that since the insect is thicker physically than it's opaque, the light doesn't go through it, and the leaf of the lettuce it will, so it's easy, it shows right away. You see a dark spot there, so that is the way to check leafy vegetables, and they're very clearly visible. Just washing it is not enough, so if you can see in this picture here, try to make this a bit bigger. You see, in addition to legs, these aphids have like a straw over here. We see the black arrow. This is the way they eat. So they put in this straw, so to speak, into whatever they're eating from, and then they just suck the liquid out, whether it's lettuce or celery, whatever it is that it's attached to. So that's why when you put it under running water, it doesn't necessarily come off because it's attached. Not claws, but it's attached in. So what they used to do, they used to soak lettuce in vinegar or in salt water, where the function of that was to release the grip of the insect in the vegetable, so you'd be able to rinse it off easier. Today, it's not used at all, because Rabbi did a lot of experiments, and he found out that soap works better than everything. So you can even use regular dishwashing soap. That's what's being used by all the kashrus organizations. So they have veggie wash, whatever it is, but it's just another type of soap that's not dangerous. You're washing it off anyway, but it's not dangerous. And that works better than anything else but I'll give you some guides where to look for more information. Just another example of something. So this over here You can see on the Zoom. So this is an example of a leaf miner. A leaf miner, you can't rinse off. It's inside. It's like a mine. You dig under the ground and it goes like this. So the leaf miner goes inside and then it just eats. It's smaller than the width of the vegetable. So it just stays inside, and you can see these, if it weren't so problematic, they'd be really beautiful, all these different patterns in the leaves that these leaf miners are eating. I'm just going to say a few words about fruits over here, and maybe I'll take some questions. So here you have date palms. So let me go through this, and I'll leave. We have 5 minutes left. Let me just go through the rest over here. Just some other examples of what it is we're looking for, and I'll take some questions. So here you have often inside, when you open up a date, you can find little things like this, which are signs of infestation. You can sometimes find worms like this. And again, they're very difficult to see unless you put it behind some backlighting. So you see over here, for example, you can't really see anything. I mean, if you're here looking at the screen, you can't see anything anyway, but if you're on the Zoom and you have a better picture, everything looks like a nice dark brown. You see something looks a little suspicious right over there, but you can't really tell. But if you put some light behind it, so then you can see clearly that's that point that I pointed to was a worm. Now, so I don't know if you can see this, but I was actually going to show you some videos. So here's a couple of resources that you can use to answer your questions. So the OK.org, they give out a vegetable checking guide. They also have an app for a smartphone, and they have a procedure for what to do with anything you might have a question about. So the baby spinach is under spinach, and the microgreens, and what to do in order to make things edible. So you can get this guide online. You can read it online. You can get it in an app. And that's one resource you could use. The other one is vadhakashrus.org. V-A-A-D, hakashrus, H-A. Can I make that bigger? Let's see if I can make this bigger. Actually, I can probably just do this and make it bigger. Make it gigantic, like one of those bugs. Read that? vadhakashrus.org. Once you're there, it's /produce. And they have a whole bunch of tutorials showing what the insects look like and giving different cleaning methods and giving some of the halachas behind it. This is Rabbi Eisen, Yossi Eisen from 5 Towns. And that's another resource you can use for specific questions. Now, just in general, I'll take some questions now. However, I'm going to say a what do you call it? A disclaimer is that in order to be able to do this properly, you really just have to see someone that knows what they're doing do it. It's very difficult to talk about it. You know, I could show you what a thrip looks like. I can't really do my thrip imitation. I have to work on it. I can't really imitate a thrip, but if you see one, say, oh, that's what we're talking about. For years, I know in seminary we would teach kashrus when I taught the subject. So I would bring in strawberries, because everybody knew on the strawberries right under the leaf, like that, in a box of strawberries, you'll always have something live, because I want to show what they look like. I don't want to show things that are clean. I want to show things that have a problem. But strawberries, you always have under the leaf, you'll always find the little worms, very easy to find, very easy to get rid of. You just cut off the top of the strawberry and get rid of the top. So you take care of that. So it's very easy to get rid of, but you can't just take the green thing and twist it off, because then you blew its cover, but it's still there. Okay, so you cut that off. But to see the ones which are on the strawberry itself, I had heard that they were there, but I checked strawberries and I didn't see them until I had somebody that knew what they were doing show me what it looked like. So then I was able to find them. So it doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It just means that you need experience. You have the Ramah speaks about it. Lagabe Nikur, he says that these things I'd like to write the halachas, but I can't. You just have to be able to see it. So I'll answer, what I can, but in order to know how to do things, in order to check them really properly, you have to know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you won't find it. Yeah, the difference between, there's a the question is, there's a difference between frozen and fresh. There's a major difference between frozen and fresh. Frozen is a lot colder than fresh. Colder. He asked me if there's a difference between frozen and fresh. So I said, there is a difference between frozen and fresh. Okay, in frozen, you don't get live bugs anymore. You get dead frozen bugs. But dead frozen bugs are also prohibited. A dead frozen bug is the same prohibition as a live walking bug. Question. Yeah, question. Well, again, vegetable is a very big word. Depends what kind of vegetable it is. It depends what it is. So frozen broccoli is a very, very big problem. Broccoli is a major problem. And that's why I'm saying that these sort of things, so there are ways that the OK has a way of doing it, but it's going to take a little practice. Once you get it down, it's not difficult. There's a new way that this Rabbi Vai really pioneered, which is eloquently titled the Shemata Method. If you want to call it the Thrip cloth method, if you want to sound not like a shmata. But what it is, you know what a Thrip cloth is? It's a shmata, okay? You take a piece of material that's very fine, and what you do, there's a little bit of a different way of cleaning the vegetables. So you clean them thoroughly with soap, and you rinse them thoroughly, and then you rinse them and you check the water. How do you check the water? So you take the water that you agitated after you already cleaned it with soap, and you take that water and you pour it through this cloth, and the cloth acts like a sieve, and then you check the cloth. It's much, much finer than a cheesecloth because insects go through a cheesecloth. Even a regular baguette is not good. It's a special cloth, but you can reuse it. You buy one of them and you just keep reusing it. And that many of the conscious organizations use that for all sorts of things that we know are highly infested, but virtually impossible to check, like herbs, like dill. Like if you want to check romaine lettuce leaf by leaf, so you can do it, right? If you want to check parsley leaf by leaf, I guess if you had a lot of time, you could do it too. You got parsley, little tiny leaves, you're going to check each one, even on a light box, how are you going to check the little tiny leaves? Okay, but at least theoretically it's okay. But dill has these little tiny, it's like needles. There's no way to check that in a direct check. So this is an indirect check. The halacha speaks about checking the food to make sure there's no insects in it. These, you're not checking the food, you're checking whether your cleaning worked. So it's an indirect thing. There was a very big chiddush in halacha, major revolution in halacha, and he had a hard time convincing the poskim, but then he showed that it works better. So if you know what you're doing, it works better. So today, like the places that are doing like a lot of volume, so everybody's using this method. And it ends up as a result of this, things that you couldn't eat before under any conditions, you can. So they have a way of doing that with broccoli. I'm not sure it works with frozen. I have a funny feeling that it doesn't. Maybe it only works with fresh, but I'm not familiar with it. I don't do broccoli with that. Okay, but that's in general. So he has on this vadakashrus.org, he has demonstrations and instructions how to do this Thrip cloth / Shemata method, and how to do it for various foods. One of the major problems with broccoli is that the florets on top, the bugs get inside. So even if you rinse them, they're stuck in there and you can't get them out. And it's also, that's the place where they hang out because they're not as stupid as they look, these insects. So the real nutritional value is in the dark green. Now the scientists say, the dark colored vegetables, they're the ones that have the greatest nutrients. So the bugs gravitate to the darker ones. So even in the broccoli itself, they go more towards that. Softer too, but that's where they hang out. And they're also protected from predators because they're able to settle inside over there. But they've worked out a method that you could do it. But again, you have to know what you're doing. Question?
Did it make any difference at all if it's juice or smoothie?
Okay, so the law is that we have, by all prohibitions, we have a law. It's called bittul b'shishim. Bittul b'shishim means that if something fell into something else, something non-kosher fell into something kosher, and it fell in by accident, and then we say a general rule, there are plenty of exceptions to the rule, but the general rule is that if it's less than 1/60th, we say that it's still kosher. There are many exceptions to that rule. One of the exceptions to the rule is that it's what's called a beria. A beria means that it's a whole creature, the way it was originally created. So that's a problem with an insect. I mean, insects in general, a person can ask a question, an insect, why shouldn't it be nullified in one? It's less than 1/60th of the broccoli. If you got more than 1/60th insects, it could be pretty crunchy food, even if it's not inherently crunchy. Although, just parenthetically speaking, there was a vegan society in Africa that scientists went to study because they're trying to figure out, because real pure vegans, there are certain nutrients that are difficult for them to provide in their diet. And they had this African tribe, and they were purely vegan, no eggs, no milk, no nothing. And they were like debating, they were all like very healthy and very strong. They're trying to figure out what was happening. Like maybe they have different pumpkins than we have, and they checked the whole diet and they made analyses in the laboratory, and the tomatoes were regular tomatoes and the potatoes were regular potatoes, and they couldn't figure out what's going on until they figured out, they had another source of protein. Yeah, there was so much insects in the vegetables and fruits that they were eating that provided their protein. So they thought they were vegan, and they really weren't. So let me just finish this point. So the reason why, even though there probably wasn't less than 1/60th, okay, but most cases normally it's less than 1/60th. So why is it prohibited? Because we have a law of a beria lebatel. If it's a whole bug, there's no such thing as it being nullified in 1/60th. But if you cut the bug in half, then it's no longer a beria. Beria is no longer a complete one. According to most opinions, even if you chop off a leg. Now, obviously, if you see a bug, you're not going to chop off a leg, you're going to take out the whole bug. Okay, but that's the whole idea. People make smoothies. So if you put the thing in a blender and it's all smaller than the width of a bug, so then you don't have a barrier. So what's the problem? It's going to be less than 1/60. So there the problem is that if we know that this thing needs to be checked and this thing has insects in it, so then that's another prohibition you're running into, which is called mevatel lechatchila, not to nullify something on purpose. This whole idea of it being nullified with 1/60, if it happened by accident, you can't do it on purpose. So if somebody does it on purpose, like putting it in the blender, so then you have another problem. So what's often done, and this is something, and I have to stop here because I have somewhere else to go now, is that I'm going to go back to the original slide over here about the halacha. The halacha says that if something is a miyut shein matzi doesn't need to be checked. Okay, so many of the kashrus organizations use a 10% threshold. And they say if it's less than 10%, it's a miyut shein matzi, then you don't need to check it. Most of the Chreidische organizations use a much more stringent percentage, a much lower percentage, under 5%, some under 3%. But if you clean something, okay, and you cleaned it, and you cleaned it, you got it to the point, let's say for argument's sake, you're using the 10% designation, and it was 40% infested, okay? And now you cleaned it, and now it's only 2% infested, okay? So is that allowed or is not allowed? Once you have to clean it, do you have to clean it till there are no bugs left? Or is it good enough to clean it that it's below the threshold of not commonly found, okay? So the halacha is that you have to clean it 100%. Once you have to clean it according to halacha, clean means clean. You can't have any insects in it. But if you get it below the threshold, you've taken away this prohibition of mevatel lechatchila. Then you can put it and make a smoothie out of it. So therefore, these things like kale, people want to make kale shakes. Kale is very, very difficult to get insect-free. Okay, they say it's very good for you. Okay, but if you clean the kale well with soap and you follow the directions over here, even if you didn't use the Thrip cloth, but you cleaned it very, very well with soap. Okay, so and then you can have confidence. At least you got it down to the level which is below the 5%, 10%, whatever the breaking point is. So you still can't eat it in a salad, maybe. Okay, but you can mix it up and make a smoothie out of it. That's how the Hachshedim are making broccoli kugel, okay, and things like this, and spinach kugel, which might be too difficult. They can't clean it till they're confident that it's 100% clean, but they got it down to a level they're confident enough that they can blend it. Okay, so if it needs bedika, you're not allowed to blend it. But once you cleaned it, you did two things. You're showing you're not doing it because you want to eat the bug. But the main thing is you got to the point where it's not, you're not nullifying your isser lechatchila because it's only a suffix isser because it's lesser. You're not allowed to eat it like that, but you can blend it. That's where the smoothie helps. But it's only after you cleaned it. Anyway, thank you very much for putting up with all of the technology and everybody. And then it says, the Chazal say that the people that are careful about kashrus will be first, they sit down by the Suda of Levi Yosin. When Mashiach comes, there's going to be a big meal with the Levi Yosin, with the Shar Habar, with the big fish and meat. And as it says, Chassidus, that's a Suda Gashmis. It's not just a spiritual delight, it's a physical delight. And we shall merit speedily now, mamash.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Berel, for taking your time. I want you to know you had a whole following on Zoom.
The next share will be in 5 minutes on Zoom.
Say that loud.